And our recording has started.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And thanks everyone today for joining in as we share a little bit about the mentorship program at DCS. My name is Jade Bollock. I'm the principal here, and I will be co-presenting with Kristen Ward, who has been our Pebble mentor for the past 3 years. And in the last year and a half, Kristen's been using some of her Pebble mentor time to both develop and then implement a mentorship program at DCS. And so we're going to share that information with you today. All right, if you want to take us to the agenda screen, Kristen.
Hopefully it'll change on yours.
There we go. So just in a brief time together today, we wanted to provide an overview of the mentorship program that we're running at Dinsmore Composite School. We wanted to explore a few of our tips that we would suggest for getting started and tell you a little bit about our story. And then we also wanted to include some lesson ideas that we've incorporated. And we do know that there's other schools in the division who are also exploring different ways of doing mentorship. So if there's anyone interested in participating in that discussion, what we would encourage you to do is put into the chat, and we will take some time at the end of our formal presentation to review the chat. So it's kind of a way, even though it's more of a presentation, it'll be a way for us to engage in a little bit of dialogue. Okay, so that's that roundtable sharing piece. So let's start with why a mentorship program. And actually, I want to take it one step back before we even talk about why a mentorship program here, and just kind of review that definition of mentorship, especially as it pertains to the school level and students. So generally speaking, we think of mentorship as a collaborative relationship between a mentor and a mentee. And the purpose of the mentorship is to support growth and learning. Often when we think of mentorship, we think of an older, more experienced person guiding a younger, less experienced person. But of course, we know from our Pebble mentor role in our school, that's not always the case. We have lots of Pebble mentors who are younger and still bring a lot of valuable experience into the school. So I think about Kristen and I, we are working as co-teachers in the mentorship. And even though I'm clearly a lot older than Kristen, she's laughing because she knows it's true. We don't see ourselves as necessarily, now I'm the mentor, you're the mentee. It's just a really collaborative relationship. And sometimes I'm the mentee, sometimes I'm the mentor, and vice versa. It doesn't really go to age. And we do think about that even with our own classroom. So we have found, even with our mentorship program, sometimes it is the younger students who kind of step into that more mentor role than the mentee role. So regardless of the role that Kristen and I play, I guess one of the things that we wanted to share was that we are trying to collaboratively plan and be role models in our school for what this could look like as co-teachers. And certainly collaboration is also one of the goals of our mentorship program for our students. We also know that mentoring can be formal or it can be informal. And prior to this more formal program of mentorship, we definitely saw lots of opportunities for informal mentorship occurring anytime that our older students and younger students got together. And because we're a really small K-12 school with just over 100 students, we do try to bring students together for gym activities often throughout the year. So that was informal. It was happening in buddy reading as well, and the SRC plans activities for our students to get together. But we decided this year to go into more of a formal mentorship program. And one of the reasons was to be very much more intentional in how we were attacking skill building with our students. So yes, we can build collaboration within our classroom. It looks different when you're bringing in different age groups to build those skills together. And we know that when we bring those different classes together, we are creating more of a sense of community and a sense of family when students are coming together as well. So where did I get started? Well, I was first exploring the idea of a formal mentorship block in our timetable. I was looking at our school survey results. And it was showing for our school that our middle level students were feeling disconnected. And I was also, thinking about the reorder rubric and that focus on relationship building. So even though Dinsmore has always been described as a family in our school survey, we felt that a formal mentorship program would allow us to strengthen the bonds among our students. So again, I did some research and reading into different mentorship programs and the benefits of that. And what I was mainly looking at or finding was examples of large schools, a lot of American research that was not really specific to our context, but what kept standing out for me about the benefits was about that school culture piece, but also the skill levels that were being built, or the skills that were being built. So 2 years ago, we implemented kind of what I would call our first steps into this, and we blocked one period in a 6-day cycle just for the grade 7s and 8s to begin to talk about the skills of mentorship and leadership. So that was the first step for us. And then this past year, in 2019, we expanded the mentorship program to include all of our students in grades 1 to 8. And as we share this with you, keep in mind it is still a small program, but I think Kristen and I would both say it has the potential to still become impactful in the long run. So when I think about the purpose then, and going back to the why a mentorship program, is to provide intentional and focused skill development in the areas of leadership, collaboration, communication, and problem solving. So we're really connecting it to the 21st century skills. Then when we look at curriculum content, and Kristen will talk about that a little bit later in our presentation, we are really focusing on those social emotional learning outcomes. And we know that for sure those outcomes are taught in health and perhaps in other curriculum areas, but this mentorship program just offers us a different approach to reaching and teaching those outcomes. So that was a long-winded why, but I think it gives you the reasons why we felt it was really important to actually block a timetable piece and really focus on this. So I'm now going to turn it over to our Pebble mentor, to Kristen, who's going to provide us some background in how we got started.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. And we're going to talk a little bit about kind of some of the co-teaching things and the way that we organized ourselves into planning for mentorship. So we talk about it as the monkeys, and you can see the hilarious picture hopefully there. That's how we all feel sometimes, I'm sure. But we kind of use the monkeys as in who's feeding the monkey during this lesson or during this class or during, the mentorship, and who's scooping the poop. So who's doing the bottom job and who's doing the top job. So that's kind of an acronym and like a little funny thing we use a lot to figure out who's taking, the brunt of the work and who's the one scooping the poop and helping out. So for the first semester in our planning, what we did was we separated our monkeys out into kind of the lessons that we had. So we had 3 teachers plus Jade on with us. So we had a teacher assigned to each grade, and then I was double assigned to one of the grades. So I was in each mentorship class. So we had the 21st century skills, and we figured that was a good place to start. So we based our first semester kind of on collaboration, communication, and teamwork. Those were the 3 that we picked. And then we split up lessons from there into the teachers. And then we went and we made OneDrive lessons so we could share them with each other. And Jay's going to talk a little bit about grade groupings, but what happened there was I was in both grades. So we had 2 grades together here, 2 grades together here, and then I was in each class. So even if I wasn't planning the lesson, I could see it once and then I could teach it the next time. For the second semester, things got a little bit crazy and a little bit busy. So I went ahead and planned out some of our lessons with some support from the other 2 teachers that were working with us. Then they could support or help whenever I needed it. So the cool thing about these lessons is sometimes we had both grades together in a classroom, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we had one in one room, one in the other. But when we were together, if I didn't need the extra teacher, then they could have that prep time, or if I needed them, they were there. So it was kind of a neat way to do it.
So as Kristen mentioned, we had 2 grade groupings. So we partnered our grade 1 and 2 class with our 5 and 6s, and then our grade 3s and 4s with our 7s and 8s. And really one of the reasons we did that was to give a little bit of separation in our peer groups. And we thought that would give a chance for the older students to work with students at least 3 grades younger than themselves. And for the most part, I think that worked out well in terms of being able to, help. And also then with our grade 5s and 6s, they were still close enough to 1 and 2, I guess, that they could help out and understand what it was like for younger kids and to do the work. So that was the big thing around the grade groupings. And I think the one thing about that is we learned that the things that even a grade 3 and 4 student could do, certainly our grade 1s and 2s couldn't. So when Kristen mentioned about having to split sometimes, we would more often probably do that with a 5-6-1-2 split. So one of the examples I'll share with you is Kristen was doing some planning around yoga. And what we found for the grade 5s and 6s, we knew that wouldn't work for the grade 1s and 2s and vice versa, because the grade difference was just too big. So that was an example of when we split. Kristen took the 5s and 6s and did that in the gym, and I took the 1s and 2s and did it in the classroom. So with that yoga, for example, the students were doing that mindfulness activity, and I was with the grade 1s and 2s, and they were so engaged for the entire mentorship program. I know the program that we had selected wouldn't have had the same appeal to 5 and 6. So yeah, that's it for grade grouping. So then on to space. I guess this is an area for improvement for us. We don't really have a classroom big enough in Dinsmore to accommodate really active activities for all of our students. So if we've got, basically with our multi-grades up to 35 students in together at once, we just didn't have the space. So we did have to plan that better in semester 2 and try to use the gym when we could. And again, that's something we'll need to consider for our fall timetable. To adjust and kind of make that work, though, we would often have just different groups in 2 classrooms. So with there being co-teachers, that still worked, but we just liked it better when we are all able to be in one space together. And you'll see some pictures of both where they were separate and together. So then on to the timetable. So as I mentioned in my opening, it's a really small program in that we're only blocking 1 hour for each of the mentorship groups in the 6-day cycle. And it's small, but again, I think it's impactful because it's very intentional planning and focusing on that skills. So Kristen's she mentioned, I guess, that X and Y and Z, X and Z. Kristen, do you want to just explain that again, how we did that?
I was just trying to kind of describe how we did it, because I was in with a class with the 1, 2, 5, 6, and then there was another teacher there, and then I was also in the class with the 7, 8, 3, 4. So that's how it kind of worked well if we had different teachers planning different lessons, because then at least, if I had not planned the lesson for both of them, then I could at least see the lesson and then kind of duplicate it for the second one. So
yeah, right. And I guess the only other thing to kind of mention is that we tried to keep the big ideas the same, regardless of what the learning activity was. So you'll see here in that introduction, for example, if our lesson was, our goals were, introduce that concept, we might choose a little bit different learning activities for the 1, 2, 5, 6 than we did with the 3, 4, 7, 8, but we still had the same big ideas. So really across the entire program, then we just felt like the students were getting the same big ideas and the same messages. So we were aligning our learning goals. We didn't necessarily always have the same learning activities.
All right. Next, we're going to talk about outcomes. So the cool thing about this mentorship class is that it basically aligns with everything. Health outcomes out the wazoo. So on the slideshow, you can see I just went quickly through grades 1 to 5 and pulled out a outcome that worked for each of them. Grade 4 had a whole pile, and then 6, 7, and 8 also did. There's tons of stuff on healthy relationships. And so I'm going to talk next kind of about some of the lesson ideas and the things that we did that tied into a lot of this stuff. And I don't really think that you can give kids too much collaboration, communication, and teamwork. So that was an awesome thing. So if we go to the next one, I can talk a little bit about some of the lesson ideas that we had. So our first focus, like I had said, was on communication, collaboration, and teamwork. So the first things we talked about were relationships. We talked about relationship building, what a healthy relationship is, what an unhealthy relationship is, and even how to express your feelings when you may be in an unhealthy relationship. So we use the I feel statements. I feel blank, so I feel sad when you call me names. And so it was a very neutral way of expressing how you feel and asking for a change in behavior. We also did collaboration. So we did resilience and grit and difficult tasks. So you can see the picture there. What we did was I actually took paper and I cut it up into like quite a few pieces. And then I had a different color for each group, and I stole one of their pieces and traded it with another group, and then told them that they had to complete the puzzle. So it was actually quite interesting to see which students were willing to beg, steal, and borrow, which students were willing to just completely give up, and which other ones were trying to work together, and how some of the mean words came out when the task got difficult. So I walked around and we wrote down all of the things that we heard and the things that we saw. And so then the kids could really see how resilient they are, how willing they are to do what they have to do to finish the task. And then we also did a teamwork lesson. I think we did an egg drop where the kids had to work together to make a device for their egg. We did learner profiles, we did character strengths, we did design challenges, and then we did mindfulness. And I'm going to talk a little bit about mindfulness in the next slide. But I just wanted to point out up top there with all the sticky notes, that was just kind of how I did a little bit of my planning. When I broke up the lessons, I broke them up into sticky notes. And then from there, Jade and I kind of figured out some themes and some things we wanted to work on. And then I kind of sticky noted each lesson and then went from there. So it seemed to work really good, especially when you have the confusing schedule of 2 classes all at once in each 6-day cycle. So this was a really fun mindfulness class that we did. We did some eating, and it was hilarious how engaged they were into it and how mindful they actually had to be of everybody else. So what we did was we talked about being mindful of others and how, you know, if you blurt out things, you are not being mindful of someone else's learning and someone else's experience. So what we did was mindful eating. So I gave them things like bananas, apples, oranges. You can see they have a marshmallow there. And we started with all the senses. So the first sense is sight. So you're not allowed to touch it. What does it look like? So the kids would take a minute or 2 to look at it. No one was allowed to say anything. And then from there, we put our hands up and shared. And it was awesome because kids shared everything, whether they thought it was right, whether they thought it was wrong. There was really no judgment. It was a really neat class. And then, you know, then we went to smell, then we went to touch, and then of course finally they got to eat it, which was the best thing ever. But we had, with the touch part, we had kids that wanted to poke it. You can see one of the students there, she's just poking the banana. We have the other kid who is squeezing the marshmallow. And then we also had the kids that of course wanted to absolutely crush the life out of a banana, which was hilarious. So the mindfulness was really cool. We did 5-minute blocks every class of just practicing mindfulness, and we did yoga, and we did mindful breathing, and so it was a great class. That was some of the stuff that we did.
Great, thank you. And that was a great class. I would have to say they were all really good in different ways. And I think if we have time, we'll maybe just come back at the end to Kristen talking about the Happy Project, because but some of the activities that we pulled on were things that we had done previously with Kristen's work with Shannon McJanet, our school counselor, around the Happy Project. So when we're thinking about looking ahead, we're going to be meeting as a school team, the co-teachers that are involved with mentorship next year. And we're meeting next week to, again, kind of look through what is this going to be like next year? What do we want to focus on? Because there's so many things that we could do to build the skills. So what kind of learning activities? It's the same thing we did last year in getting ready for planning. We just got together and just did a whole big brainstorm and then said, oh man, we've only got 14 classes in each semester. what do we really want to be intentionally focused on? So that's why we had gone with the communication and the collaboration and the mindfulness. So of course, in my role as principal here, I'm thinking a lot about reentry in the fall and thinking about that social emotional learning, and really considering what are the ways that we can use our mentorship time to focus on that social emotional learning. We know that emotional education is really important for our to help our students build resiliency skills. And I think the mentorship class has been a good opportunity for us to bring in some of the language of social emotional learning, like Kristen had mentioned, the I feel, or even the range of emotions that you might feel. So as I said, we're going to do some brainstorming on where we could go. We weren't able to finish up our mentorship planning for this year, of course, with school closures. So we do have some lessons prepared. And we know that there's tons of resources and tons of material on the resource bank. We don't have to start anything from scratch. We just need to be intentional in our themes, I guess, is what we're really wanting to do. So we just think that by bringing students together, they not only have a chance to learn about the emotional language and learn about resiliency, but they have a chance to actually practice it, and not just with their peers. And for some reason that it does change the dynamics of the learning. And really, again, going back to that leadership piece for our older students, it's giving them a chance to lead. And we've had even this year, talks where I'll just pull out the older students and, remind them about that role modeling piece and how it's important for our young kids to see that. So, those are the other kind of side benefits of this whole mentorship program. Okay, so we did want to open it up into the chat or microphone if there were any specific questions. I know we still have a few minutes left here. Is there anything specifically you'd like us to talk a little bit more about? I know it's just been a very broad, general introduction.
Sure, I've got a question. So did you have any issues with buy-in from the middle year students, or was there a lot of grumbling about having to work with the younger, or were you able to bridge that gap somehow?
Well, I can address that. So the year before we started the mentorship program, I had set aside one period in the semester 2 timetable, and I think I called it something general like literacy. So it fit in with our ELA outcomes. And a part of that, I was already setting the stage for leadership, for mentorship, for building community, for culture. So they didn't really know what that meant because we had done that kind of work prior to the actual mentorship. And so when I did go back even last year to talk to the grade 7s, one of the things Kristen and I had said is we need to actually teach them how to be engaged with the younger kids. So even how to sit beside somebody. So one of the things that we had done in one of our mentorship classes is Kristen kept the younger kids out a little bit longer. And I talked about that. I said, okay, let's talk about what it feels like when you walk into this class and you're a little pip and you're looking for your big person. What are some things we could do to make them feel welcome? So we did have to really be intentional in talking about those skills. So we said, how do you make that little person that comes in feel welcome? Well, when they come in and I say, Kristen's here, then the partner can go, oh, I'm a partner. So I did have to really intentionally model that. And I think I spoke to them once, maybe twice. I can't even really actually remember. But remember, Ian, I had done that prior work in the semester before. So they were kind of getting ready for it. And I guess the other thing is we continually tell them, like, we're a family, we're a small school. Those little people love you, and they do. And so once they learned, I think, even how to work with them, they could just feed off of the energy of those little people that came in and really did love to see them in the hallways too.
And I think too, the really cool thing was Shannon McJanet a couple of years and I had come up with, this is what Jade was talking about with the Happy Project. And I think the reason why we get to buy-in with the 7-8 group is they were actually the kids that went through the Happy Project. So they get it. And it's more than just a class on healthy relationships. Like, So what it was we took the whole year and we did, there's an article about happiness, and it's 10 keys to happier living. So we took the 10 keys and we split them into the months of school, and each month was a different key. And we actually did some research-based surveys with the kids at the beginning, at the end, just to see how increased their happiness was. So we talked about what happiness actually means. We talked about relationships. We talked about giving to others. We talked about resilience and growth. We talked about trying new things. We talked about emotions and acceptance and what actually your place in the world is. And so along with all the stuff that we had to like explicitly teach them, they already had the buy-in because they already went through it. So it was kind of cool being able to reteach some of that stuff. And we did actually reuse some lessons with them. And I had some kids go, oh my gosh, that's not what I got out of this the first time. So just hearing it again older was kind of cool, because they're like, oh, I remember this, but this means so much more now, or this is so different, or you know, that they can help kind of the younger ones go through the learning that they had with that topic as well. So it was really cool to see.
And I think, Ian, if you don't have that background like we did here, what I just found was keep going to the purpose, right? You know, why are we doing this grade 7 and 8? Make it really purposeful. And so when I would say to them, I need your help, because not all these little pips have these skills. We need to show them how to be good communicators. I need your help with it. So here's some things we're going to do. And so, again, it was really being intentional with all of that and being very transparent, I guess, with the older kids about why we were doing it. And, you know, we just tagged on to a couple of our students that really have those skills too. And so you could highlight, you know, when so-and-so did this, how do you think that other little person felt? Well, really welcome. They felt comfortable. Right. Those are the things we all can do. So the buy-in came. And again, the buy-in came when the kids in the hallway would now have conversations with these older kids. And again, to go back to that Our School survey, for us, you know, it is a concern where middle years do tend to kind of, you know, change and they weren't as engaged. And this was a really, even though I was saying to the kids, the older kids, we need you to help us with these little kids, we also needed our little kids to help our big kids feel like they were part of our school community as well. And we have ideas on even asking our big kids to have lunch with their little mentors, you know, once a month, that sort of thing down the road. So that it doesn't happen just in class time, but we're looking for ways outside of the class to foster that mentorship. And again, it's slow and it's small, but I think already we'd say that we've seen the impact of that good change. Oh, Melissa says we did coding buddies with 7s and 8s and our 3-4s at my last school, and the older kids really embraced being leaders. It's mindset. And you know, Melissa, we did the same thing because I lead a STEAM design at our school, and it was exactly the opposite, because mainly it's Kristen's grade 3-4s that are in STEAM design, and so they were the leaders when I said, hey, take your dash and dot robots and show the big people how to do some things. So it was the same idea, but completely reversed when our little people were like, no, we'll show you, it's fine. So there's so many activities and ideas. I think, again, when I come back to that purpose, we wanted to build leadership. We wanted to build community. We wanted to be really intentional in bringing in that language that Kristen had talked about with the Happy Project. We want to be able to say, you have strategies now, right? So when, you know, even calming and mindfulness strategies, everybody was hearing that. So when I have an issue in the office of somebody that's out of control, I can go in and say, okay, remember what we talked about. So it's, you know, language as well. All right, anything else?
Did you make a conscious decision, like a discussion about what this was going to be about? And because I noticed that you were focusing on the mindfulness and the happiness, did you make a decision not to do with academic skills like math, for example?
Yes.
Or were you planning to do that as well?
Well, we have in one of the big plan, we have more things like design thinking and maker spaces where you can bring in, you know, other subject areas. We only have it 14 times in a semester. So we wanted to, I guess, harness what we had already done with the happiness project, take it a little bit deeper with that area. But honestly, Ian, if you saw our opening brainstorming strategy, we had every idea out there, and we could have gone in any direction. So we just went with building on that happiness project. And again, for next year, when we think about that reentry and some of the work we've been talking about with the emotional piece, we just wanted, that's why we went there. I mean, my background certainly with the coding is let's go into some more design thinking. Kristen came back from the design thinking workshop with the Pebble Mentors last year and just thought, we could do that with our kids too, right? So the hardest part, Ian, wasn't that we had ideas, it was trying to narrow down to what we wanted to focus on. So that we could have gone there for sure. Anything else? Anything, Melissa, from you? Getting your chats along the back here and back channel.
Yeah, I apologize. I've been muted the whole time. My partner in crime, my little 8-year-old, is zipping around here. She's actually doing Minecraft things, so I was trying to keep it quiet. I am loving this. This is like so awesome. I see this as such, like, everybody always wants to have that connection to either younger or older students in their class, and what a meaningful way to do it. I just see it as so much, having so much more value and impact than. And as much as I love reading and reading buddies, I just see this as having so much more impact and more relationship opportunities and like just a larger community building for your school, doing it with this focus. And it's kind of like taking reading buddies and putting it on steroids to quote when he's talking about it. And I'm absolutely loving this. I would love to let some other schools know and for them to have a chance to come and see this in action. And yeah, and I'm just curious, like, what would you say were some of the big differences that you saw with the interactions for the kids, say, on the playground as a result of doing this?
Well, Kristen, I don't know if do you want to
Sure.
to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the 7-8s aren't on our playground because they're in the high school end, but you do notice a little bit more leadership coming from, especially those students that, you look at and you're like, you should not be leading a smaller child. And it seems like they kind of got the kick in the pants they needed to realize that, like, you are the one that they are looking at, and you are the one that needs to help them now, and right, and how to be a mentor and how to all this. So I think they built closer relationships with some of the other kids in the other classrooms for sure outside of recess, which was kind of neat too. And I think it's kind of a cool connection to the high school as well, because they don't see them at recess anymore. So, I mean, the high fives in the hallway are endless. So it's kind of a neat thing. Our school is quite close already. So I think it just probably built another layer on top of what we already had.
Well, when I like seeing this and hearing you guys talk about it, like, it just, to me, this is like a textbook, perfect example of building that collective responsibility within your school and that feeling of our kids. These are all our kids, and we're in so much so that we're mixing them up and letting them, enjoy each other and learn with each other. I just think it's fabulous.
Yeah, it has been. And again, obviously closing out of school early was disappointing for us because we had so many things planned. Again, going back to that grade 7 and 8 piece, for sure I see in them that connection, and it's still very early and it's small steps, but I would say that I saw growth in those kids too, especially when we were, showing them what does a welcome look like. What does a welcome feel like for that little person? Why do we do it? So it wasn't just like Mrs. Bullock said, when that person comes in the classroom, make them feel welcome. It's like, what do you think it feels like when you get welcomed? What does it feel like for you? So those little side conversations, just build that whole social emotional learning piece, right? And it becomes about more than just us. It becomes about, like us, like me, becomes about our whole collective school. So yeah. I'm really hoping that, especially with our little people that continue to come up through the mentorship program, that we do see more of those leadership skills developing. And I do think that they understand the why a lot better than they did at the beginning of the year, for sure.
And there's nothing more heartwarming than seeing a grade 8 boy who is a complete boy and who is kind of a troublemaker go up to a grade 1 student and take them by the hand. Like, it's the cutest thing you've ever seen. So.
And I think what's so great about, we always talk about the power of being explicit. And I think people do a really good job with that in like teaching language arts and math, but it's harder to do with the social emotional. And that's exactly what you guys have done with talking about, how to actually welcome somebody and how does it feel. And then the students understand that why, and then they get it. It's not just something that, oh, so-and-so wants me to do this. It becomes something that they see the importance and the value of it.
I think even in that reflection piece, when Kristen was talking about the puzzle pieces, that they had different pieces in different groups, we did literally walk around and we just took notes and we documented what we saw. So the reflection piece at the end of that lesson was to come back and talk about the different ways the groups handled that. I've got a piece missing, right? What do I do? Whether it was I just went and took it off somebody's table and they didn't notice, to, kind of getting a little bit, not angry, but a little bit hostile with the other group, or how they worked it out. And we just said, this is what we noticed. This is what we noticed. So then we had even that to say, okay, how could we do that differently when we're working together and we need something from somebody else? So, I mean, for me as a principal, it's been great because I can definitely go to that if there's, issues around relationships at noon hour and things like that, where we've got to work on, we can talk about the mentorship class too. So that's been good. And we're really looking forward to, continuing it this year and see where it grows.
And I think your involvement too, Jade, shows how important it is too, that it's not just something you do in your class. This is something that you need to do all through the school, everywhere we go. This is how you be good people. And I think that, showing your willingness to get right in there too with them is awesome. I think that sends a great message for everybody.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's been fun. Well, and Kristen's just super fun to work with. So
so much fun.
Yeah. So our last slide does say sharing is caring, because we definitely are willing to share. I mean, we know that the recording is, this is recorded, so we can share it out that way. We've got lessons, we've got ideas, and we're more than willing to, put those together for people.
I think that's great. And we'll definitely get this into our PD section, and hopefully we can get some more schools starting to think about this, because, so many people do carve out time for that relationship building between the different grades, but to have it done in a purposeful and meaningful and intentional way like this, I think has some pretty awesome impact.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Okay. Thanks, Kristen.